Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Those Horror Pals, where we exclusively talk about creepy dolls and creepy kids, because apparently that's all that's being put on the market these days.
Nice doll.
That's what you think.
Annabelle Creation is the second best Annabelle film and the fourth best Conjuring film in what is now the ever-growing Conjuring universe. It's the directorial debut of Gary Dauberman, the writer of the last few films in the Conjuring franchise, and it stars McKenna Grace, Madison Eisman, and Katie Sarife, and it tells the story of one night where Annabelle breaks free of her glass case in the Warrens' evil room of dark stuff, and terrorizes the Warrens' 10-year-old daughter Judy and her babysitters. When I first heard they were making the third Annabelle film, my response was probably the same as everybody else's, which was just... But then I heard it described as Annabelle meets Night at the Museum, which... that just sounds awesome. The trailers only further painted it as such, and having seen it now, Annabelle Comes Home is exactly what I was expecting. A really dumb, but really fun time. I want to start this off by saying I find it really amusing that this showing just skipped all the trailers, because honestly this movie itself is one giant trailer for every future Conjuring film that is going to be down the road for the next 5 years. That's basically what this movie functions as. It's an extended excuse to showcase a bunch of new monsters and ghosts, so that audiences can go, "Ooh, he was creepy. I want to see a movie about that one." And call me a capitalist whore if you want to, because it definitely worked on me. Honestly, guys, I had a fun time with this movie, shameless corporatism and all. I love that at this point in the franchise, we've abandoned all effort to even try and make this film feel grounded in reality. We got a ghost werewolf that I'm pretty sure is going to be the focal point of The Conjuring 3. We got a dress that possesses people. We got Charon the Ferryman from Greek mythology. We got a TV set that predicts the future. We got a weird monkey toy. And honestly, guys, I was here for it. But seriously, there were a fair amount of things in this movie that work regardless of how ridiculous it gets. McKenna Grace is honestly one of the best child actresses working in horror today, but if you've seen The Haunting of Hill House, you would know that. Katie Sarife's character is way more interesting than I expected her to be, and the central themes of this movie are actually pretty resonant, especially for a movie that's just essentially a smorgasbord of ghosts. Its explorations of these girls' relationships with death is actually pretty damn interesting. Still, I would appreciate a little more if those relationships with death tied a bit more into the central conflict of the film instead of just functioning as a catalyst for it. Bear with me for a second, because this feels like something the movie was trying to do before just dropping it altogether. Daniela lost her father, and she blames herself, and thus is fascinated by the paranormal and wants to try and reach out to his spirit in order to make amends. Judy is at an age where she's starting to be plagued by the same visions that her mother is, and her closeness with something as grim as death is causing the other students around her to shun her. And Mary Ellen doesn't have any connection to death. But throughout the film, you can see the seeds of them trying to do something with that, and it's never fully explored. So hear me out. Multiple times throughout the film, it's pointed out that one of the ferryman's victims looks nearly identical to Mary Ellen. She's the spitting image. Then, in the film's climax, Mary Ellen has to face this literally when she's forced to face down her own corpse. Now, this could have been really cool if it was established that Mary Ellen has a weird hang-up about death, or she's really scared of her immortality, and it would be way more triumphant when she has to ultimately face down her literal demon in the climax. But instead we just get a jump scare. And that's where we get to the problems with this movie, because there's a lot here that doesn't work as well. There are a metric fuck ton of jump scares here. There's a weird romance subplot that ultimately doesn't go anywhere and feels pointless. There's a weird forced joke about the love interest in question's nickname, and how every single character in the movie repeats said joke, much to the amusement of no one. The humor is honestly never funny, and the scares are not scary. There are just a ton of jump scares in this movie, and honestly, at least for me, none of them landed. The movie does take a bit long to get going, but in the case of this film, I'll be more forgiving than I was about the first Annabelle, because at least in this film, we're in a familiar location with familiar characters, and it's easier to relate to a situation when it involves characters we recognize and characters that we care about, even if we just know them tangentially. Not only do we recognize Judy, we know enough about her and her family and her character to give a shit. And that's more than I could say about any character in the first Annabelle. Also, for a movie called Annabelle Comes Home, both Annabelle and the demon attached to her really are not featured very much. They both get remarkably little to do throughout the film's runtime. Like, yeah, she's the catalyst for all this happening, but honestly, she and all the other featured spirits are ultimately relegated to about one big horror set piece each. Still, at the end of the day, I had fun with Annabelle Comes Home. It never quite reaches the seriousness or the quality of the first two Conjuring films or Annabelle Creation, but it's miles better and more fun than both The Curse of La Llorona and The Nun. Eons better than the first Annabelle. Still, I am going to give it the same rating that I gave The Nun and The Curse of La Llorona, mostly because I should have rated both of those films lower, and I'm going to say that Annabelle Comes Home is good for fans of the Conjuring franchise, because honestly, at this point, if you're going to see all these films, you know what you're getting into. And as long as you're not going into this expecting to see a deathly serious horror film, and honestly, why would you be when it was described as Annabelle meets Night at the Museum? I think you'll have a grand old time. 6 out of 10, don't make any more Annabelle movies, please.